really happy to introduce to you Leslie Maniotes. Lizzie and I first met Leslie in Boston back in 2015. Oh, was it 2015? That recently? Okay. And we'd been exploring information literacy models and scope and sequence for our school and that kind of thing. And I know somebody's got that topic on the agenda for later on. And we ran into guided inquiry design. I've run into it a little bit in my master's program. And so we contacted Leslie and said, hey, can you tell us more? And she said, sure, let's meet in Boston, because she's in Colorado, so that makes sense. So we all hooked off. We brought a couple of socials teachers with us, and we hooked off to Boston and spent a wonderful few days getting to know teachers, teacher librarians in the Boston area who were using guided inquiry design. And that was the start of a beautiful relationship, which has ended up, for me anyway, we've run into each other in a number of conferences and stuff over the years. But recently, she's put together a webinar on, which I had the pleasure of attending, a 3-part series on, what was the prompt question? Do we need to teach research in an age of AI? Which, I mean, if you're gonna devote a 3-part webinar, I think the answer is obvious, but it's a good question. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? So within the context of our ongoing discussion of AI and how it affects us, I thought it would be really good to have Leslie's perspective, especially from a GID background, but also like, what ways should we be looking at research as we face AI in our classrooms, for better or for worse, and what does that look like? So I will shut up, and Leslie, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark, for opening the door to having me here today. And thank you, Bonnie, for setting everything up and making the arrangements. I appreciate you. Yeah, we've had I can't believe it's been like 9 years or something now that we've been, in conversations about, guided inquiry and at St. George. And it's been such a joy to kind of track your progress and keep working with you on all of that. So, and yes, I did a webinar that had a very simple answer, yes, but the more I dug into it, the more complexity there was to it. And after the 3 sessions, Mark posed another question to me because he knows that inquiry doesn't end with answers, it ends with questions. And learning is all about questions, which made me really think about this presentation today. So I am so excited because what I've created for you today is really my top of the line newest thinking about pulling pieces that I've been working on for a number of years together in a way that I think should be really interesting for you. I hope that it gives you new ideas and things to try out right away, and some new thinking about it, because we're at the dawn of this new age and we have to flow with this. It's the beginning of AI for us, and we'll have to flow with it. So let's dig into this together. Oh, okay. So I don't know how you all feel about acronyms. But I'm a little bit maybe dyslexic or something. So when I looked up what we were, this is just a little joke, but I looked up what your group was, and I found the International Association of Baggage System Companies. Did you even know that existed? I'm sorry, I had to laugh at it, but I know who you are, and that is not who you are. So I know that you are the ISABC, and I actually presented at one of your conferences back in 2018. I think it was you all, and so that was in West Vancouver, and I presented a conversation about guided inquiry design. Maybe some of you were there. So thanks again for having me at your meeting today. I appreciate it. So I have to toggle a little bit back and forth. Here's the question that was in my webinar. If GPT can answer any question, should I bother having my students do a research project this year? And honestly, I have heard teachers and professors at university level really literally asking this question. People from Princeton University saying, I'm not going to do research this year because of AI. I think it's really, really fascinating that I've heard a lot of teachers just kind of throwing in the towel, maybe pushing the pause button until they decide and figure out what to do. So we did this whole webinar series, and where I kind of was investigating this problem. And I feel like because of my work over the last 15 years or so, working with librarians and teachers and really understanding the library perspective, that you and I would certainly be aligned in our response to that problem, as Mark has already indicated. Of course, the answer is yes. We want to continue doing these projects. And school students most definitely need to continue research, even when the answers can come so readily with these large language models. And we know the answers that lie in critical thinking, using multiple resources from which to learn, and the value of information literacy. And I'll touch on some of those, basic reasons first in this presentation. But then I'm going to dig into a little bit about the actual research process and what we can be doing to support students, because AI helps us become more productive and efficient. So it's really in the thinking of efficiency and productivity. And we know that all these skills, critical thinking, information literacy, research skills are beneficial and essential for now and the future, for not just for college readiness, of course, for college readiness, but for basic life skills now, right? And while we know that inquiry-based research has great value for our students, some things are going to need to shift in this new context. So what we'll be talking about are some, not all, of what needs to change. And then after the session, I hope to have some time for question and answer. So we'll save your questions and we'll do that at the end. I hope that I'll create time for that. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me. Over the past 15 years, as I said, I've been working in my consulting business with schools and districts across the US and internationally, including some of you, where I've provided professional development and training for the implementation of guided inquiry design. And I extended from these the core 2 books into this series, Guided Inquiry Design in Action, where these books showcased tried and true tested examples, including actually an example from Mark Crompton with one of his English language arts teachers at St. George on a Romeo and Juliet unit they did. And you can find that in the Guided Inquiry Design in Action high school book. So we have the K-5 elementary school book, the middle school book, and the high school book. So that's what I've really, been doing on the ground, working with teachers and doing training on this model using the Guided Inquiry Design Institute mostly. And just so you know, my team, this is my team. So I'm the teacher, curriculum specialist, literacy specialist on the team. And these are the 2 books we wrote together. The middle person here is Ann Kaspari, who is a museum educator from the National Air and Space Museum, a Smithsonian institution in the US here. And she informs this work thinking about outside resources and how we can bring them into inquiry-based learning. And then who we'll talk about a lot today is Dr. Carol Coulthaw, the one on the far right for you. Without her, none of this none of guided inquiry design would exist. Her research on the information search process, which you probably learned about in your library programs, I hope, really, and I'm sorry, she's a distinguished professor emerita from Rutgers University. And that research really is the foundation and grounding for all of these applications in schools. And we will be thinking about the ISP today, the information search process as well. So that's my team, not just me. And so I wanted to, I'll show this later as well, but in the second edition of this book, Guided Inquiry, Learning in the 21st Century, Dr. Kulfa wrote an evolved look at information literacy that moved away from skills to a concept lens. Rather than teaching information literacy skills that are isolated and kind of standalone, which are important, also looking at it from a conceptual lens. We have been talking about, she and I have been talking about learning, how learning concepts create lasting learning, while skills are often used in the moment. And unless they had a lot of repeated practice with those skills, students they drop off, without use, you kind of lose, you lose your ability. While this idea of information literacy concepts had an excellent start in this book, we both felt it could use some explication and practical application. Guided inquiry design is the place where these concepts and information literacy actually meet up. They naturally meet up and occur in this process. So about 2 years ago, she and I went about making a course. I recorded interviews with her about the topic of concepts, that the 2 chapters that she wrote in that book. And through the course creation process, I came to know the material extremely well. And so in today's talk, I begin to blend the content of information literacy concepts and what we learned about the information literacy concepts within the guided inquiry design framework, and AI and use in the library. So like pulling all these pieces together. And that's why I'm so excited about this, because it's really at the forefront of my thinking. This is really cutting edge stuff. Now, a little disclaimer, I am no AI expert. I do not claim expertise. I'm not even an information literacy expert. I'm not a trained librarian, as you all are. So these are really all my thinking, but coming from the lens of the learning landscape in schools. And I am an expert on curriculum and instruction and literacy and the information search process, as well as the guided inquiry design framework, as I'm a co-creator of it. So I have a deep understanding of the research process and how to scaffold and support the zones of intervention within that process. And in this session, I'm like super excited to apply some of what's happening with AI to use within that process, as I know that all of you work with students who come to do research in your libraries and your schools. So being a group of librarians, it won't be you who decides if they're doing research or not initially. As far as whether or not to do research, that may or may not be in your control, but I won't go into that too much today. But because of the nature of your role, you'll be charged with supporting it when it in fact does come to you. So I'll be talking more about that and how AI can help with student research. I'll also connect to the guided inquiry design phases, and I'll describe them a little bit for you, as some of you, I won't go into too much detail, especially, I'll really focus on the phases that happen in the library. For the purposes of today, we'll hit on some theory and then make some practical applications. So there'll be strategies you can take away with you, I hope. And in the end, I'll save time for Q&A, which I already mentioned. Okay. So here's this prompt again. And I think thinking about, should we keep doing research projects with students? I'm going to provide you 5 reasons why. And they're great for to keep in your back pocket as a librarian. I know you probably already know these things, so I won't go into too much detail. I just want to discuss it a little bit, but because this is what everyone's saying, this is what I feel like is out there and is important, teachers are interested in, and so I don't think that's bad for us to really think about, so you can begin to have those starting conversations. I know librarians are always looking for having better conversations with teachers. How can I collaborate? I know you're always trying to do that. And so these things are important for you to think about. somebody asked in the chat if you can have the slides. I will certainly send a PDF of the slides to Bonnie and Mark after this, and you can have access to those. Yes. So when teachers come to you and say, ask this question, particularly, or say to you, I don't think I'm doing research this year because of Chat GPT and the like. The definitive and surface answer, as you know, is to do it, but we want to keep some things in mind. So let's move forward. These 5 basic reasons. Okay, so critical thinking. In guided inquiry, we talk about pausing and pondering. And generally, inquiry and research are really important in the face of large language, AI, availability, because students will continue to need to think critically, obviously, but even more so. In guided inquiry, we talk about pause and ponder. So that's something to think, a concept to think about, stop and think, right? Everyone is talking about critical thinking with regards to this, and teachers and you can teach critical thinking in a lesson, but student-led research projects are really excellent opportunities to extend the thinking, as you know, into evaluation and analysis, beyond a one-shot lesson, one article, one conversation, or text. And so it's learning over time in the research process, with multiple resources, that takes the critical thinking to a deeper level for each individual student. And you know that inquiry and research require our students to think critically for real purposes. They have to ask questions, go from broad ideas to more narrow focus through examining and reflecting on information. They have to be flexible with their thinking, which I think is a majorly important thing for people to be able to do and have lots and lots of experience doing today. I think people are really accepting the one thing, confirming their bias, and not really examining further. So we have to train adaptability and flexibility, and that is really the information, the research process is a wonderful time to be able to do that. It doesn't happen in that one-shot critical thinking lesson where you can get kids to think deeper, but are they getting that adaptability and flexibility they need with the information? So choosing and curating resources, we know this. They have to make decisions. Decision making is a critical thinking exercise, and it's hard, and we can teach kids how to make decisions. They have to choose and curate not only sources, but information within those sources. Each one of those decisions about what information will I use is a critical thinking exercise. So there are layers of decisions about information, peeling that onion of information that happens in that research process. And of course, then creating something out of all that work that they do to share with others. So really critical thinking is woven into the fabric of the process, and the very process of inquiry-based learning. And it's authentic critical thinking that occurs here and not contrived through that lesson design. Such as in my lesson plan, it includes critical thinking. So why do I need to do research or inquiry-based learning and spend the effort and time to do that? But hopefully those responses are ones you've already thought about, but are really important for teachers to recognize that in this process, it's worthwhile doing this because all of these things happen naturally and even more deeply and along these phases. Okay, the second one that, even if you ask AI, why should students do research today? It'll tell you this. Isn't that funny? Okay, so developing research skills, conducting research, we know involves curiosity, as I said, formulating questions, locating sources, organizing information, constructing personal understandings, coming to new conclusions, ideating and solving problems, or just investigating how problems are solved. These skills are valuable, as I said, in academic and professional settings, and it takes humans beyond what AI can directly provide. So this is a really critical skill for today's world, for our students to have now and in the future. And of course, information literacy. This is number 3 on my list. Shocker, right? Oh, information literacy, Martin. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but source evaluation, as we know, is critical for students to do, and it's shifting, and it's even more essential now. With the AI environment, source evaluation is shifting, right? So research and inquiry-based learning requires that we evaluate sources of information, as I said before, for a real purpose, for our own purposes. And we'll go into more depth into this. I'm sorry. In our information literacy course, I don't think I even mentioned it. When I showed that thing, that's actually a course that we did. Yes, I did mention it. In that course, we do go into more depth about how everything that comes across our feed for us and our students needs to be evaluated today. So what we talk about in the course is creating a habit of evaluation. What are some habits instead of skills? What habits can we get into? Every time something comes across my feed, I have to evaluate it. Think about your own life. That's what you do. And we want our students to get into that habit. So inquiry learning provides opportunities to teach students at that point of need how to evaluate sources for informed decision making and use. The more practice they have using information, all kinds of information, and evaluating it for real purposes, the better equipped they are for life and the university, obviously. Students learn to assess the credibility and relevance of sources when conducting research, and the process teaches them to question and verify information rather than accepting it at face value. The more practice they have in that, the better. And we know it's a skill that's vital in the era of information overload and misinformation, sadly. So we're going to talk about the 2 different kinds of searches that happen in guided inquiry design or in the research process. There's an exploratory search and a time when gathering information is important. And these different kinds of searches require different kinds of location, evaluation, and use of information. So experience in both of those contexts is hugely beneficial, if not essential, for our students today. Okay, so here you have, how many of you are familiar with the information search process? Just curious have you seen it before? This is the model of the information search process. Hopefully you have seen it or you're familiar. If you're not, then here it is. This is the brick and mortar upon which guided inquiry was developed. And it's Coolth's research here. And her major findings, she found, she researched students that were going through a research process, and this was the process she found. She looked at feelings, thoughts, and actions that they took, and had a lot of major findings come out of this. She did a larger study that verified this process, and I think it's kind of, I'm going to go to the next slide real quick. It's kind of funny to see people who kind of recognize that this is just the natural way of creating. I came across this blog post that had this graphic, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the information search process right there. You know, it's exactly the same thing, and this is just a person who creates and expressing this kind of feeling. And so, you know, we have first this yay moment where we have a lot of optimism. Then we kind of, oh, where am I going with this? You go to this dip of confusion, frustration, and doubt. And then you kind of dig yourself out of this hole through information, through getting a perspective of which direction you want to go. And then you begin to find your way. And if you look at the guided inquiry process, it is the same shape. So look at this shape, don't look at that other information yet, but the shape is exactly that shape that this person indicated, right? You see that? And so we created the shape of guided inquiry based on the affective layer of the information search process. And so we really took that affective into consideration because it's really important for students' learning and helping us to know how to guide it. So, but one of her major findings was this phase of exploration. So we typically used to think before the ISP, and people that don't know this process think that the information, the research process is get a question, collect information, and report on it. Right? Or it starts with a task. Like, here's the task. Okay, then you find your focus and you answer your question and you present on it. Right? So that would be like 4 phases in a sense. But what she uncovered was that there were 3 phases before they were able to formulate their question or focus for their research. And much work had to be done in these 3 phases before they could clarify. Once they clarified, it went pretty easily. And this happened, at different times for different people. This was a personal process. Everyone went through this. And those that didn't actually, a lot of them found themselves copying, pasting, plagiarizing, and their reflection at the end, or original studies people, the reflection at the end was, oh, I wish I had started earlier. And as a matter of fact, because they failed at formulating that focus and realized at the end that they needed to spend more time, the very next time they did a research project, they changed their behavior. And so that reflection on the end, and so in guided inquiry, we actually do have this assessment at the end where students are reflecting on their learning. And that is really critical to how they behave, how they learn how to learn, we call it. So this exploration has to happen, or happens. I shouldn't say has to happen, because this is describing what actually happens in people. It's not something that we can control. It's actually happening in them. And I have an article about when they come to the library, they're probably in the explore phase. So start where they are. And I have an article about that I can share with you if you'd like that. It's actually on my website for free and easy to find, so I can share that link with you. But that's the thing, is there's this phase of exploration before they formulate and collect information, as she called it. And in that, so that was one of her findings, all these different phases, that it wasn't 4 simple things that happen when someone's doing research. All these phases happen, the feelings that are there. And then also there's this moment of uncertainty. So the uncertainty she names here in the initiation phase, at the very early phases, where students are vague about what they want to study and seeking relevant information. But then they think, oh, I might go this direction. They have some optimism. But then this phase of exploration has confusion, frustration, and doubt, where they are really having that information overload. And that's why in our process of guided inquiry, we have this symbol of explosion in the explore phase, to remind us of the confusion, frustration, and doubt that naturally happens right before they clarify. They don't know where they're going. So much information is coming in, they're not sure what to do, and before they clarify. And so that is a really critical moment. So Dr. Coulthard described a principle of uncertainty, and in her work, in the book Seeking Meaning, which actually she's coming out with a second edition of that would be very interesting, I think, for you all. I go back to it all the time. My Seeking Meaning is just all kinds of stickies, and it's a mess. But I go back to it all the time for finding out how to guide this process. When I want to turn to the original work, I always go back there. I highly recommend it for librarians. But she described this uncertainty principle that is a requirement, that's a necessity for students to get to before they can clarify. And it's so I say, and that it's really important for students to experience uncertainty in this age of AI, and be comfortable with being uncomfortable when you're learning. It's so easy just to plug my question in and get an answer, and that feels very good. So we've got to give them more experiences where they have in school, in that controlled environment, in the library, where they are experiencing a little bit of uncertainty, and then providing them with strategies to support them through those confusing and frustrating times. And so the research process opens the door for us to help them with that. So my fourth example here is uncertainty. And uncertainty, as I said, happens in this dip in the guided inquiry process. So the guided inquiry process is mapped, as you saw, from the information search process, and it has been developed to address each phase of the information search process. And so in thinking about how would we design the learning experience knowing the information search process, how would we design it to help students through each phase? Recognizing that the phases exist, how would we shift what we do as far as the research in schools to support students, rather than just kind of ignore this frustration and doubt? How can we support them in it? So this uncertainty exists. It happens really deeply here. Giving students experience with that uncertainty and information through employing inquiry-based learning and research is really critical. By reflecting on the process and what we call learning how to learn, is when students are reflecting on the process. Remember, I told you about that student that pushed everything off to the end. She never really identified her focus for a long time, and she got to the end and then reflected on her process and changed her behavior and action in the very next research. Well, that also happens all the way across, and that's what we call learning how to learn. Really reflecting on, how am I experiencing this process? What am I doing that helps me? What do I want to do differently next time? What do I want to keep doing? That kind of thing. So reflecting on their process is learning how to learn. So students gain an awareness of how they feel uncertain in this process instead of running away from it, because it's very a human response to run away from uncertainty. That is researched and true, that fight or flight mode. And so they want to run away. And so ChatGPT is an easy way to get them to get away from that fear or want to run. But we need them to sit in that uncertainty just a little bit. And when they can feel it and experience it, they can learn strategies to support them when they feel that way. Actually becoming aware that they feel uncomfortable is an important first step. And in guided inquiry design, the framework, we have strategies and tasks that explore phase, that helps students to do the right work, what I'm calling the right work lately, in that moment when that uncertainty creeps in. So guided inquiry design framework also helps us to predict, as the teachers and librarians in this moment, when this uncertainty is going to come about. And knowing when it's most likely to come, we can intentionally offset that uncertainty with our appropriate action. And the actions students and teachers can take in the face of uncertainty in learning are first recognizing it, as I said, providing time to reflect on how this learning experience is affecting my mental state or actually my physical state. How do I feel at this, literally? Am I anxious or confused? How does uncertainty feel for me? It's a really human response, and recognizing that response is an important skill for today, for being able to persist and not just find the easy way out. Because we know with persistence comes deeper learning, and that's what we're seeking to do. But first, we have to be aware of it. We have to be aware that it's actually even there, and name it and qualify it. So learning through inquiry and not direct instruction where everything is certain opens the classroom as a space where students can feel that uncertainty and embrace it and move through it. Guided inquiry design provides strategies at that explore phase, and some people call it the dip, to support learners and teachers with that work. So I say, and I spend a lot of time on this uncertainty piece, but I think this is a really important, and maybe your teachers won't understand that, but I think it's really helpful for you to know that this is a real reason for doing research in the face of AI today. That's unique and different than we can say than any other process. Does anybody have questions about the things that I've presented thus far? I feel like I want to just take a second to, or are we good? Any questions you have that you're thinking about these things or comments? I'll be looking in the chat too. Okay, for the fifth one, this is the final basic reason why, and then I'll get into more detail about, excuse me, about what we do knowing these phases. But the fifth reason why inquiry is that inquiry is not about getting an answer. So there are many definitions to inquiry, but in guided inquiry design, we define it broadly. And Google, in their certified coach curriculum, in their lesson on differentiating instruction with technology, have quoted our books on what the definition of inquiry was. I was really happy to see that. And you can read that definition. Put it in the chat if you don't mind. Interact with me a little bit. What do you notice here? What do you think about that definition? What stands out to you?
I really like how it ends with the final point being about, it's about community and like relationships over just a transaction. I put in this question, I get this answer. It is, you're building out the relationships between people at the same time as you're gaining information.
Yeah, and this community of learners, and you know, that's the beauty of happening in school. When you're out there on your own in the world, you may be doing it by yourself. You may be collaborating in your workplace, but you know, it's much of it is an independent search. And so doing it in social interaction is this wonderful, grand opportunity we have in school to do that. And so we should be harnessing that. Thank you. What else?
You know what I mean? Like it encompasses not just doing the research, but also having like a curious mind and very flexible thinking as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think the aspect of not just getting the right answer is very critical, because sometimes that's just what everybody wants. They want everything tied up with a bow and it's done, students and teachers. So Sometimes
What is
you don't get to that conclusion.
What does my teacher want me to say?
Yeah.
Absolutely, especially those independent school kids. They want to know what am I supposed to be doing? How can I get the A? What do I need to do to get the A? You know, those type A kids. So this is hard for them to really flounder around in this process. And there's another really good reason for us to continue to be doing research, and that they need it maybe more than others. You know what I mean? Because yeah, sorry. If we could put that on mute. Thank you. So yes, it's those students are really trying to find that right answer. And you know, in the context of AI, it's so easy to find the right answer. So these answers are now easier for us to find, but research and inquiry is about so much more than that. It's about coming to understandings. It's about learning about a topic. I'm interested in a topic and I'm going to learn about it. I am not going to find answers. I will find answers, but through the answers that I find, I will construct my own understanding. And that's the most important part of it. So inquiry is more than just answering questions or getting a right answer. It's this investigation, this exploration, the search, the quest, the pursuit, the study, reading deeply to learn from multiple sources of information, right? That's special. That's really special. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's challenging. It's intellectually stimulating and interesting. And there's something we can do about that. So I think it's really important that we shift. So a big action, I think that if you're not already doing this and your teachers aren't already doing this, is to really stop framing research, student-led research, as getting an answer to your question. Asking a really excellent, amazing question and getting the answer. Because answers can come from many places today. And what we're looking for is that quest, that pursuit, that deeper knowledge, learning from multiple sources of information. So if we can do anything, I think right now it's really critical that we get this across to our teachers, you and ourselves. Listen to your own language, and when you're talking about research, are you talking about getting answers? Or is it kind of this finality, you know, here's your question, get your answers, even with the littlest ones. Sometimes it's easy with the little ones to say, oh, you asked a question and get your answer. I still think it's important for us to shift our frame, the way we're talking about it, very differently. I hope that makes sense to you. So those were my big five, and this last one being that inquiry and research is not about getting answers. It's about the quest for information, the quest for understanding, and asking more questions. You know, it's about learning in general. And so that's what we want to keep framing it as, and keep doing it. So those are my five biggies for what I think we need to keep doing research projects in the age of AI. Okay, so I'm going to switch now, and for the rest of the time, I'm going to be talking about how to use AI, or what are the implications of the guided inquiry design framework and the ISP for using AI for research. So remember when Wikipedia came out and teachers and librarians had one of two responses. They either stuck their head in the sand like ostriches and told students never to use it. Just, okay, Wikipedia is not a thing we're using, right? Or they did something different. The others shifted. This new resource was out there and said, okay, we have this source that's widely available to all my students. Let's teach students what it is, how it works, and when it's appropriate to use and when it's not. And that's kind of the same thing that's happening, I think, with AI. We have the same two choices: ignore it and stick our heads in the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist, or we can harness it and think about how can we help students to use it effectively rather than plagiarizing or getting answers to provide the research report that's necessary to get the A, right? So that's what we're looking at. So don't be an ostrich. Okay, so a couple things about, we enter with large language models, and we start with a caution because even the large language model of ChatGPT itself reminds us, check your facts. While we have safeguards, ChatGPT may give you inaccurate information and it is not intended to give you advice. So it itself, before you ask its question, a question or talk to it, it tells you that this information may not be all correct. So same as Wikipedia, be careful. Always evaluate what comes in front of you based on what you know, based on other sources, based on other information. Always. We're always evaluating today. Evaluation couldn't be even more important. Okay, and then the other thing is this anthropomorphizing of it, they're trying to make it look like all these large language chat bots are trying to make it think that it's human by making the 3 dots go. So it's like when you're getting a text and you have those 3 dots going, it makes you think the thing is thinking. It is not thinking. We need to teach our students that it's not actually thinking. And also it gives the responses in bits, like it's typing. It is not typing. So we want to, and it's doing that on purpose to try and, seem more comfortable to us, right? It comes slowly. The information is divulged in bits for us to be able to read it slowly. And so this is not happening like that. It's designed to do that. And so we may humanize it or think that that's human, but we want to make sure that our students know there's not a human behind it. It's just a machine that reads exceedingly fast and has can find information from a huge body of knowledge and information to spit it out to you quickly. And it's not always perfectly correct, as it is still learning, right? So you cannot put your own critical thinking hat down. Don't take it off when you pull out the AI tool. It's not the end of critical thinking. So beside the cautions about these large language, and there's many of them, models and chatbots, what can we do? Well, we can learn to create better prompts for AI tools, but what prompts and when? If we're not just seeking an answer within the ISP research base, we can interpret some answers. Okay, so the next section is really going to be about how can we use AI to facilitate student research in the library, I would add. So you're probably thinking, okay, so if I'm supposed to embrace this, how can I use AI to facilitate student research? If that's the way I'm going, if I'm not going to be an ostrich, then what do I do? So let's go back to the ISP for some answers. Well, first of all, one of Coulthard's major findings was that there are 2, and I've already stated this, there are 2 stages of research. The first stage in the process requires that research the first stage of research is explore. And the second one, well, she called it exploration, and the second one is collection. the kind of research happening at each of these phases is very different. We want to treat it differently in the library. We want to treat students differently when they're in these different phases, and they require a different mindset and a different kind of action. So let's dig into those. In guided inquiry, we called it explore to simplify. Exploration, explore. Collection, we decided to change the term to gather. And you notice the arrows going in and out. It's because students go out, get information, come back, go out, get more, come back. So that's what the arrows are indicating there. And we called it gather rather than collect. Just because it's a similar term. It's a little bit more user-friendly. But anyway, that's what we called it. So we have in guided inquiry, the guided inquiry design framework, specific tasks for each one of these phases, all of them. We're going to only talk about here these 3 phases because that's what happens in the library. So the open and immerse typically happen in the classroom, and then they come to you and explore, typically. And then they stay with you through gather. Then they typically go out back to the classroom. This can be, if you have a makerspace or something like that, they might be creating with you as well. But create typically is back out in the classroom. So this is how the research project ebbs and flows with the collaboration with the teacher in guided inquiry design framework. So we share the task, they come to the library, and then they go. Sometimes the share happens in the library. A lot of things can happen, but these 3 phases in the middle are really your responsibility. These are where you take the helm and really support the students. Your teachers are your sidecar, your co-partner, but you're the one that really helps the students in these 3 phases. So we're going to focus on these and not the others. For the others, we'll have to have another day or come to some of my other training. We can talk about all of them. But today we're just going to talk about the explore, the identify, and gather. These 3 phases in the middle of the research process. So identify, so I've talked a bit about explore. Identify is in the middle, right in the middle of the process where students arrive at the focus for their research. And then the gather is when they're collecting information, they're finding multiple sources, evaluating those sources, taking notes, interpreting them, and making meaning from those sources. So that's like what we typically think of as the research phase. Okay, so let's start with explore. At this point, students are typically wrestling with 2 things. Now in guided inquiry, they've opened, they become curious about the topic. The teacher has introduced a concept that they've become curious about. And then they've immersed themselves. They've learned some basic things about it. So their inquiry questions or research questions aren't those innocent, naive questions. They're better questions because they are based on knowledge and information. So they learned something in that immerse phase. Sorry, maybe I should have. So that this immerse phase, so they open the project and the thinking, they become curious. The immerse phase, they build background knowledge, and then they come to you and explore. So in explore, what we're hoping for is that students leave immerse with some interests. They have some interests of their own that have come out of those first 2 phases. So they don't come to the library just wide open, I don't know what I'm doing. They come to the library with 3 or 4 things they're really interested in. And that makes a big difference. And so they come and they're thinking, what am I interested in? And how much information is available about the topics that I'm interested in? That's the job of explore. And that's pretty precise because they have an eye on, I want to create a focus for me to go more deeply. But the first part of that, rather than getting down into confusion, frustration, and doubt, with this wide open lens, we can really look at it and say, okay, I want to look at what I'm interested in and how much information is available about what I'm interested in. That's what's going to help me to make a good decision, an informed decision about what direction I'm going in. So as a result, what actions are they taking? You're probably wondering. Okay, so in guided inquiry design, they browse information and explore. You're teaching them to browse. They're broadly searching to find out what of their interests is the best way to go. Which one? This means that in the open and immerse, they've thought about what's interesting to them. So that has to happen in those earlier phases. So it's really important that you collaborate with the teacher, because if they come to you and explore without that kind of those interests budding, it's harder, and they can dig down. But let's say that they come to you with some interests. And so we want to teach them how to explore. How do I look around and find out what is out there about my topics that I'm interested in? The other thing we ask them to do is document what they touch. So if they look at some sources, we want them to write it down, because something that comes to them now might be useful later. So we're not sure where we're going. So it's helpful to write things down now, the sources that I look at. Whether they're going to help, whether I absolutely am sure I'm going to use it or not, I don't know. But it's still useful to write it down. Because if I don't write it down and I want it later, I have a hard time. Now, learning that the hard way, certainly we can learn that the hard way, but it's useful to teach them to use a log to track their sources. And they're skimming and scanning text. They're not digging deeply. So we can teach them how to skim and scan text, not take copious notes. It's not a time for gathering information or collecting information. It's just a time to look around and browse. Browse sources and browse within sources, if that makes sense. And we also want them to be reflecting on their interests. How interested am I in this? I'm looking at this source over here, and oh, that makes you even more interested. Or now that I'm looking, I thought I was interested in this, and blech, I'm more interested in this. Now's the time when I can really change my mind and think about what am I interested in based on the information available. So this is the task of Explore. And they're doing all of that in their inquiry journal, and they're doing the reflection to make that informed decision. All of this has a purpose, intention, and tasks. So that's pretty intentional action, right? We're weighing our interest and information available. It's more of a quantity question in some ways rather than a quality question at this point. It's not like I'm finding the best source, right? It's like, how much information is out there about the things that I want to know? So you're evaluating the quality, but it's more surface level quality. It's more about how much information. Does that make sense? All right, so what do we do with that? In the exploratory phase of inquiry, if they know they're still exploring, they can ask large language models like ChatGPT to explore for them. But they have to know they're exploring, okay? And this is what a professor from the University of Arizona did with her college students, her university students, and presented this at ALA San Diego this summer. And so I thought this was a fascinating presentation where she had them actually see the word explore in this prompt here. I need to explore my topic, blah, blah, blah. So these are their interests, the students' interests. And asking the large language models to help you explore is a really interesting idea. It can be very helpful there. So you can craft your prompts depending on where you are in the process. Now she goes into detail about how to compose prompts for AI. This is what she looked at in her research of these college students, university students who were using AI in their research process. For me, and I said this in my webinar, I think it's really important K-12, for us to teach kids how to use it for the explore phase and shifting their mind. So there's a couple things we're doing. Shifting their mind about finding answers to seeking meaning, right? Changing that mindset in our students and making understanding. But first they have to know the task, the process, and be in the process and reflect on where they are in the process. So it's all kind of really fascinating how it used to be, and I was going to say this later, but I just can't let it go. I have to let it go now. It used to be that the ISP was important for students to know. Now it might be essential, because if they know where they are in the process, I am exploring now. I'm gathering now. I'm trying to seek my question now. They can use AI and the resources available to help them be more productive and effective in their process. So actually, it used to be like a good idea that we get kids to understand the information search process, and now it may be like essential. And that's like my mind in creating this presentation. I kind of came to that and I was like, wow, this is like really changing things. It's really changing things. And the ISP really can help them. So first we really need to help them understand the process, go through the process, reflect on the process. How am I feeling? All that stuff that I talked about earlier, as well as like, okay, so if I'm in this moment, then what do I do? How can I use AI to help? So I think first is really understanding the process, and then we can take the next step to begin to get students to create prompts for AI at these 3 different phases. So let me show you how, some ways of how around that. Oh, well, and this woman, Marianne Nauman from Arizona, she saw that, and when students play around with AI, they may find this learning curve as well. So, oh, wow, ChatGPT is amazing. It can answer any question. Oh, shoot, it's not always correct. Look at this learning curve here. So it's like super excited about it. And then, oh, it's great when there isn't a precise right answer, but it can't be trusted with the answer must be perfect or reliably useful. So there's this learning curve that the students at the university level kind of found out when playing with AI. And so I thought this was interesting. And I just share it with you as just kind of like, this could be what our students may go through as well. And the final thing they learned through their exploration of AI in their research process was, now I understand where the real value lies. It can definitely give me a productivity boost, but it's important to recognize when it gets things completely wrong. So it's not perfect. That's definitely something that we want to think about. But this was an interesting curve, I thought. Okay, so the other thing that Marianne Nauman shared in her presentation were these like frameworks for prompt creation. So I thought this was new to me, and I thought, oh, interesting. People have really researched and thought about like, how do you create an excellent prompt? I think this can be a lot of high level stuff, and we don't want to get the weeds with all of these thinking about prompt generation. We don't want to like overdo it. Sometimes it might just be good to let them play around and see what they find out. But when we really are giving more clear prompts, we do get a better response, as we know, and from the AI. The other thing that you can do with AI is layer your questions. So you ask it one thing and, oh, shoot, that wasn't exactly right. And then you ask it more, and you can keep refining as you go, which is a really cool exercise in and of itself. But some of these elements can help us. And then this was what she actually landed on, Marianne Nauman, in that her research. This is what she landed on as far as how her prompts looked. So you can get it to do or produce what you want and need at that moment. The the most important, thing about, now let's go back to the process, explore, is that if they don't explore at that phase and they begin to gather, they will, as Cool Thought calls it, drown down in information. And that's what causes that confusion, frustration, and doubt, to the point of like, I give up. I just want to get a quick answer to my question. So we want to avoid that. And we don't want them to get completely lost and read too heavy resources in the explore phase. We don't want them to drown down in information and collect information at this point. It's a major pitfall of research. Exploration is for exploration. It's for looking around, not for digging in. And so guiding them to explore is really critical. And so I love the idea of making students aware of that and using that in the prompt. So these are just a summary of some things we talked about as far as how to use that. So just in the we can have students create prompts for all kinds of tasks, and have them actually use the word explore in the beginning of the inquiry process when they come to us in that phase. Okay, so what might we do in identify? Do you guys have any questions about explore before I move on to identify? How are we doing? I saw some questions in the chat, but I wasn't. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we can talk about that one later. So let's go into the turning point of the process. So the next phase is the identify. So in explore, just use explore in the prompts. I'm exploring these interests. What do you think, what's some information you have for me? Okay, so in the turning point of the process is when they have explored, they kind of have an idea of where they want to go, and they're seeking to identify their focus. So we can also use AI to support them to do that. At the identify phase, we were continuing to weigh interest and availability of resources, okay, to determine our focus for the next phase of research, where we're really digging in. Where do we really want to spend our time and energy, because it takes so much time to do? Where do we want to go? So students armed with information and knowledge can ask ChatGPT, and there are prompts that can help with that. So here's a simple one that I played with. So play with me for a minute here, and I'll show you what I kind of looked at. And I took a simple one because that just helped me to kind of look at it from a younger student's lens. Oh, golly. Sorry, what are you seeing on your slides? Can you see the slides? Are you seeing, what you're seeing changed, or are you good? Okay, it clicked on a link for me, so I just opened my internet browser. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so I'm doing a really simple one. This is literally a question a second grader asked in one of my groups. Why do some animals have whiskers? And I think it's such a great inquiry question for a second grader. Like, why do animals have whiskers? It's just something we take for granted, we assume. So I think this is a really cool question. And this student went on to look at dogs and cats and rabbits, and how they use their whiskers for different things. Now, this is before a while ago. So she learned that whiskers are on the face, and as she created these clay models to show it. But in the age of AI, inquiry and research can get kids to go deeper, actually, when they can ask their own questions, and the GID framework supports all students to get there. So let's just say this child, let's say they were in 5th grade instead, okay? So 5th grader asks what what was the question again? Anyway, they're interested in whiskers. This student is obviously interested in animals and whiskers. So I asked ChatGPT, I'm interested in learning about the function and use of whiskers in different animals. Which animals have people studied to learn specific information about how whiskers are used, and which animals have the most information available about whiskers and how they are used? So like really getting to which animals have been researched, which animals has whisker research been done, and I'm in 5th grade. So what information is there about this, right? So the Chat GPT goes on to like explain a general description about what whiskers are. But do you notice my prompt is the information and what has been studied. So I'm trying to, I have a general idea of my interest, and then like what information is available. Because remember, we're weighing interest and available information. Okay, so let's see what it showed me. Number 1 is rodents. Number 1, and notice that child in 2nd grade looked at dogs, cats, and rabbits, very familiar animals. But rodents' whiskers have been studied the most. Then cats, domestic cats and big cats alike, like tigers and so forth. Then seals and sea lions, which I didn't even think of. Then otters, then bats, which I didn't even know they had whiskers. Then dogs, then primates. So these are the order of the animals in how much information is available about them. Holy mackerel, this like blows it out of the water. Usually this is the thing that they're struggling with, but we can actually ask. So the student then focuses in on something that's really useful to study. Wow. Wow. Now, you know, the student now has a choice. Do I want to really learn about like all the different things that whiskers can do? Or am I really interested in cats? You know, so you're going to help them to weigh their interests. And they have interests, they have information about the studies that are available, the function, and the research on each one. So I can make an extremely informed decision about my topic. And this is a 5th grader. This is pretty cool, right? So that's the challenge of the identify phase as we see it in guided inquiry design. Information and interests. And then, you know, maybe they want to study sea lions and seals, or maybe they, oh my gosh, I love otters. Maybe I want to study otters because here's the information about otters. You know, they may completely change their topic, but they're basing their change on information coming in. Now, I wouldn't say have them search this and then make their decision. I would say have them search this as a tool, as one of the factors that play into their decision, helping them to know interest, information available, right? They've explored to see the information available, to find it themselves. Now we can really lay it out. Make sense? So a really cool way to use these large language chat bots to help us search in the identify phase. So here's the answer. Animals with the most, here's an answer. Animals with the most extensive whisker research are rodents and marine animals. They have the most detailed and extensive research on whisker use. This is due to their highly developed whisker system and the accessibility of these animals for both behavioral and neuroscientific research. And then there's all these other things here that it tells me about whiskers. Now, I didn't tell the original chat bot who I was. I didn't say I was a 5th grader in this quest. So I would have done that, and my prompts probably would have been the same, but or would have been different. Perhaps their language would have been different, right? But again, this just makes me realize that now there are all these words here. There's tactile, there's sensory, there's, it's a moment where we can say to kids, okay, now you see all these words. What do you need to know more in order to make a decision? What are some words, vocabulary words that you want to kind of dig into or help you understand the use of whiskers in animals? You're really cool interest here. And so kids make them become curious about the answers. It's not that, oh, now I have the answer. It's like, okay, what does this help me to want to know more about? So like that inquiry mindset all the way through this process is critical, right? So really getting them to, something we could do here is teaching this is to get kids to become curious about what the machine spits out. Evaluate, again, that information based on your knowledge, your understanding, and what maybe you don't know yet. I don't know what the word tactile means. I want to know what that means. So what's here and what else do you need to know? So it just is like this really cool interaction. Okay, so I was, really interested in whiskers and their functions. So my question is going to be more about how whiskers work and what they're used for. And I'm going to look at rodents. Even though I don't, it's not my favorite thing, but I'm more interested in dogs because I have one. But now that I know that all these different animals have whiskers, I'm more interested in how whiskers work. So it helped me to interest and available resources. So I want to start with learning about rodents' whiskers because they have been studied the most. So the students can provide a rationale for what they're picking. And I want to know all the things they use them for and how they work. And embedded in that are the systems and neurological functioning. And I don't know how far I'll get as a 5th grader, but it's really cool direction and very different than I could have done without the AI, I think. Very cool conversation in a sense that I've had with this machine to help me navigate the information landscape. Okay. So again, interest and available information. All right, so what about gather? Let's move on to gather. The gather phase of guided inquiry design. Oh, shoot. Okay, here we go. All right, so I did the same for gather. I asked Chat GPT. Now I'm telling it I'm a 5th grade student. I'm learning as well. Use your prompts, structure your prompts in a way that give you the right information. So now I'm a 5th grade student looking at resources that I can learn about rodents' whiskers. Can you name some sources that would be good for me to use to learn about that? And I found it really interesting what it told me. For a 5th grade level, here are some kid-friendly resources where you can learn about rodents' whiskers. We've got Nat Geo with a link. Tells me a little bit about it. Oops. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so we talked about this. I added the task, the action, the role, the context. I didn't really give it too much of a context or too many constraints. I could say I'm trying to do this with it, right? Or provide some example. I could have done more with my prompts, but I kept it pretty simple, thinking about like from the mind of a 5th grader. But now we know that like telling it I'm a 5th grader is going to give me stuff that's kind of at my sort of reading level, which is amazing. Also, these AI tools are really good. It was always really hard to get materials at students' reading level, and now it's like super easy. They can fix any text to the reading level, or make it easier to read, change it. So they're like amazing with the large language problems, right? Here are some other things that it gave me, and I was kind of really interested that it spit out a variety of texts. So we've got Nat Geo to start. Then we have the San Diego Zoo, which is a great zoo. DK Find Out. Science for Kids is a website. And then 2 different books. It even gave me 2 books I can find in my library. And I really like the fact that, you know, a variety of types of sources were available here. I could start on something easy and then, you know, check out these books. I've got a whole direction to go in as a 5th grader, what I could learn about this, begin learning about whiskers. As I learn, I can ask it more specific questions. I can use those vocabulary words that I know are valuable when talking about these things, and it may give me some more information or ask it for more resources related to specific and more specific and more specific questions. So, you know, great that it's giving me a variety. Is it a perfect set of texts for this task? No, it's a good start. So I think it's a useful tool. We can use the tool. We can have students use the tool. We don't have to be afraid of the tool. But what we really want to do is getting them to ask it to do the right things. And asking and getting an answer is absolutely not what we want it to do when we're engaged in inquiry and research. Okay. So I'm going to open it up to questions in a moment, but I have a couple more things I'd like to say, and I want to share something with you. So in conclusion, I have 2 things. Earlier, I talked about Coolthaw's findings, that there are 2 major phases of research. Well, another major finding in the information search process is that this process needs guidance. I don't care who you are, you need guidance along this way. So whether students use AI or not, a guide moving through these phases is a critical human element that will never go away. Librarians and teachers together are needed to help students manage their emotions when learning from information, a vast amount of information, to help them know where they are in the process, to help guide them to take action steps that are useful at each phase, at each point in this journey. So while it feels like AI might take the searching out of the process, there's still so much guiding and awareness of self and learning to evaluate information and the tools. And you all can greatly support students to navigate these waters. And this is huge. So librarians, of course, are not going away. I believe that the future will have more librarians. That's my opinion. And finally, when you think about it, and I already had said this, I gave this away earlier, but I'm so excited to say that when you think about it, it used to be helpful to know these phases of the information search process and where you are. But now it's actually pretty critical. It's really something kind of profound. They're going to need to know the process. They're going to need to know how it feels in them, how they experience it, what these phases are. Because knowing what phase they are in the process, having an awareness of the process and how it goes for them is actually going to help them to design better AI prompts to support that work of each phase. And in supporting each phase, the outcome is going to be vastly improved. Their experience through the whole thing is going to be vastly improved. So that just stokes the fire under us for our job in giving access to this knowledge of the information search process or the guided inquiry design process, and providing experiences with research so they can try out using AI to be more efficient and productive. Wow. I was so excited to come to that conclusion, and I hope that was helpful to you. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'd love to open it up for a Q&A. Unless there's a slide you want me to leave up there, if there's something you want to discuss, that's what I have for you today. Oh, I do have one more thing. While you're thinking of your questions, I want to tell you that this course, I think, would be really wonderful now that you're thinking about all these things. I want to invite you to extend some of the things I talked about today by taking this course. And it takes a conceptual lens, as I said before, on information literacy and places it in the context of guided inquiry design and just in time in the phases. If 10 or more of you want to take it, I don't know how many of you there are, but as an organization, I can give you a discounted price for all of you. So if this is something that prompts you to want to take this online course, we also can have a cohort that we can have some discussion around it as a group after you take it, while you're taking it. So there's lots of things we could do, or you could just take it on your own. I've recently done that group cohort, and it fosters a wonderful conversation and connection building around these ideas. So I just want you to know that as a group, if you'd like to do that later. So, and then I just want to say, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email. Here's my website. It's just Leslie at guidedinquirydesign.com. Super easy. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also Guided Inquiry Design is on Facebook and Instagram. I don't use Twitter or X so much anymore. I'm there, but I don't really go there anymore. So these are the places you can find me. So I hope to see you on the other side in other ways. But so now let's open it up to questions. What are you thinking? What is this inspiring in you? What are you wondering about? How can I help?
I have a question. Did age to begin this?
I think the mic.
Oh, the mic is off.
It's on.
I think she missed the first part though.
Yeah.
Oh,
I did. I
Just-
missed the first part. Thank you.
I just wondered if you had a recommended age to try this with.
I think it depends on your students. I mean, I think you could try one aspect or one part of it with almost any age, really. I think what's most important though is to help them understand the process. I think that those two can actually happen tangentially, potentially, right? I don't know. I would throw that all out to all of you. And I think it depends on the students, the subject, the time, what you're trying to accomplish, right? All of those factors come in when we're thinking about what students should we do with that kind of learning. So I wouldn't, maybe fourth grade and over is my kind of guesstimate as far as developmental level, etc. I don't think there's any right time though. A lot of ways you can play around with it. What do you think? Oh,
It was nice to have some actual practical applications, because I find a lot of the AI talk is all still quite conceptual, so it was nice to actually look at a way of actually implementing it, so thank you for giving us some tips that way.
good. Yeah, Raina.
Hi, everyone. So my question was sort of around the validity of the sources that the Chat GPT is generating. Obviously, the lists that you gave us are good, but when you get into more complex questions, I've found, especially at the grade 12 level, it does a mashup of different sources. So I'm wondering whether obviously I would advise them to double check those sources, but do you find that's a bigger issue or?
Absolutely, and the university professor kind of said the same thing, right? So university students at that level are also finding that. I think that you can scaffold, so that's something that maybe I had in my notes and I didn't say, but I think it's interesting, and I don't know I have all the answers to all the prompts, but let's say there's a year 12 student. You as the librarian, and I think maybe as a collaborative group, might think about, for year 12 students, what kinds of things, how can we structure their AI prompt so it's not spitting out information, but maybe sending them to certain kinds of resources, as I did in the Gather, right? And for the year 12 students, how will that look? What kinds of sources would we like them to use in humanities, in science? Like what, so we could get them to ask those kinds of prompts that gives them specific kinds of information rather than just a generic response that may not have valid information. Where did that information come from? You know, that kind of thing. It's also really good at summarizing a large amount of text, obviously, and reading really fast. So we can ask it specific prompts. So I think that's our challenge in the future, is to say, okay, what do we want from the year 12's X project? What kind of information do we want them to be looking at? And how can we get them to ask AI better prompts to accomplish that? That's a really cool question for librarians to ponder and think about and help each other with. I'd love to, you know, see that conversation, because I think there's no right answer right now. We're really at the beginning of this. So, I mean, they're at the beginning of using it at the university level. So what are you guys going to do? What are you doing about this? And so now's the time to play around. Don't ask it a general question and seek, that's not going to be useful, right? Ask it more specific questions to get what we want out of it. So that's going to be the task. Thank you, Nicole, for your comment. Lisa asks about, getting teachers to collaborate with you. I think it's critical. I recommend, I really seriously recommend, and not, like, honestly, it's from the heart. It's not promoting my own stuff, but what I found is, and what other people have found, is that when people come to my online institute with a teacher, they learned how to collaborate together. They learn the benefit of each other. The teacher learns all the things the librarian can do. You learn about the process, and you design a unit that's you feel confident to implement. So if there's someone that's wondering about how they can do inquiry and research, and one of my courses might support you to do that. It opens the conversation, it opens the discussion, and it really supports the collaborative team to know who's doing what when and all that stuff. And it's not, the onus doesn't lay on you to explain all of that stuff. So many times the librarian is left having to be like, please do research and work with me, and this is what I can do to help. But when you are trained together in the guided inquiry model, we kind of take care of that. And through learning together and designing a unit together, you really accomplish that. But I hear you about, I just think the conversation at the uppers level of heads of school needs to be, we're in a different age. I mean, the information age was one thing, but this age, we've got to do research more and not less. And I gave you many reasons why. There are so many more. These are, my library kind of lens reasons. There are many more. But these are a really good start, and it's a really good rationale for we've been trying to get teachers to stop teaching covering content. Oh, they need this content. How are they going to get it if they're asking their own question? Lots of ways they can get it. And if you, like we said, the inquiry community, if every student in the class is asking a different question, you're going to have 30 different perspectives, or however many kids are in your classes at the end, and all of them are going to be learning from each other. So who knows what they might learn? So it's not, this direct instruction has this place, but we have to open spaces and time for this to happen. I'll get off my soapbox. What other questions?
Well, I was lying anyway. I was just saying before the mic came on, thank you for your time. I think this was a really valuable session. Gave us all lots to think about. I hope people reach out. I've sent you a couple of things as we've gone through here, but to keep the conversation going. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to say thank you, Mark, for pushing my thinking, because this took me farther than I had ever gone before. I did a 3-series webinar series, and in 2 days after doing that and talking to Mark, I went way beyond what I had done there. So thank you for the opportunity to think about this. This is where I am. It's a beginning. Let's continue together. It's an exciting time to be in education, exciting time to be a librarian. All the best to all of you. And thank you so much for having me today. It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.
All righty. So the most important thing on the agenda is lunch. Can I ask